Brutal anger from Lewis Hamilton towards Charles Leclerc after Leclerc completed his final flying lap out of time, causing Hamilton to miss out on Q3 today at the British Grand Prix. Stay until the end to see Hamilton's explosive reaction against Leclerc. What was initially forecasted to be nothing more than the routine nail-biting conclusion of a typically dramatic Silverstone qualifying session has, in just a matter of hours, escalated into a sprawling and unprecedented conflict, the likes of which have not been seen in modern Formula One. At the heart of this explosive saga are two of the most scrutinized, experienced, and high-profile drivers on the grid, Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc, now embroiled in what paddock insiders are labeling not just a strategic dispute, but a deeply personal and emotionally volatile confrontation that could have wide-ranging repercussions far beyond the current race weekend. What took place in the aftermath of Q3 was not merely a disagreement between two drivers on opposing teams. It was a full-blown eruption of frustration, suspicion, miscommunication, and raw ego, fueled by a backdrop of mounting pressure, high-stakes title implications, and a pervasive sense of mistrust that has been brewing quietly beneath the surface all season long. The genesis of this dramatic spiral can be traced to the closing 2.5 minutes of Q3, a critical phase where every element must align with precision: tire temperatures, energy deployment, track position, wind direction, even psychological momentum. As the seconds ticked down, every engineer, strategist, and driver knew that this would be the moment to either seize pole or suffer the consequences of microscopic errors. Ferrari had, internally, drafted a tightly controlled lap sequence plan. Leclerc was reportedly told, through multiple internal radio communications now dissected frame by analysts and pit lane reporters, not to initiate another flying lap. The reason, according to Ferrari's strategy team, was to create an orchestrated window that would prevent traffic congestion, particularly around turns 15 through 18, allowing all top contenders, including Hamilton and Russell, to complete their final attempts unimpeded. However, what unfolded next was entirely unanticipated. Leclerc, either by his own initiative, through misinterpretation, or in a display of calculated defiance, launched into a full-blown qualifying lap, bypassing the team's carefully laid framework. The decision sent an immediate ripple through the rest of the field. Hamilton, who had been positioning himself behind the Ferrari to time his entry into clean air, was caught completely off guard. Instead of finding space, he encountered dirty air, a disrupted rhythm, and compromised entry speeds, factors that torpedoed his final sector and cost him what many believe could have been a front-row start. On team radio, Hamilton's tone was initially controlled, but the post-session recordings reveal a sharp escalation in his frustration once he returned to the garage and saw the broader picture unfold via telemetry and replay footage. Behind closed doors, Hamilton is said to have immediately confronted Mercedes' technical team, demanding clarity on how Ferrari's unexpected move had blindsided their planning. But it wasn't just data or strategy that ignited the fuse, it was the emotional undercurrent of being, in Hamilton's view, deliberately obstructed. Minutes later, Hamilton reportedly sought out Leclerc directly in the paddock corridor near the media pen. What was initially expected to be a brief, perhaps even polite clarification rapidly descended into a full-scale shouting match, observed by several stunned members of the Ferrari and Mercedes press teams. Sources close to both camps have confirmed that Hamilton accused Leclerc of sabotage, implying that the Monégasque driver had gone rogue with the express intention of disrupting his rival's lap. Leclerc, for his part, responded with equal venom, reportedly calling Hamilton paranoid, and insisting that the decision to push came from instinct and urgency rather than malice. Their exchange, laced with expletives and icy sarcasm, was only cut short by the intervention of FIA officials and their respective press officers, who managed to steer both drivers in opposite directions before cameras and microphones caught the confrontation in full. In the hours that followed, the paddock atmosphere remained thick with speculation, tension, and hurried whispers. Team principals Toto Wolff and Frederic Vasseur held impromptu meetings with their technical and communication staff to assess not just the strategic implications but also the psychological toll this incident might carry into the race. Wolff, when asked about the incident by Sky Sports F1, offered only a cryptic response: "Let's say there are things we saw today that require further conversations behind closed doors." Vasseur, ever more cryptic, dismissed the event as a misunderstanding, though his body language and terse tone suggested anything but nonchalance. The ripple effects extended beyond team walls. Journalists from major international outlets scrambled to gather every possible angle: radio recordings, off-the-record quotes, slow-motion analysis of Leclerc's outlap. Former drivers and pundits took to social media, each adding fuel to the speculative fire. Jenson Button referred to the altercation as one of the most emotionally charged bust-ups I've ever seen between two top-tier drivers. Damon Hill, more critical, questioned Ferrari's judgment and the consistency of Leclerc's strategic obedience. We've seen this before. Charles trusts his instincts more than the pit wall. Sometimes it pays off, sometimes it blows up like this. Meanwhile, Sky Germany's analysts pointed out discrepancies in the Ferrari team radio, noting gaps between the initial instruction and Leclerc's final green flag confirmation. Among fans, the incident triggered an immediate firestorm across social media platforms. Twitter, now X, erupted with hashtags like #LeclercSabotage, #HamiltonBlocked, and #SilverstoneShock. Thousands of fans took sides, with some praising Leclerc's racing instinct and refusal to play nice in such a cutthroat environment, while others blasted him for undermining not just Hamilton's effort, but the unspoken code of mutual respect that often governs Q3 procedures among the elite drivers. Leclerc's Instagram account was flooded with both praise and vitriol, prompting his media team to restrict comments temporarily. Hamilton, ever media savvy, posted a cryptic Instagram story shortly after the incident. Just 3 words in white text on black: "This isn't over." Adding to the intrigue, telemetry from both cars is now being reviewed not only by the teams but by FIA compliance officers. While no formal investigation has been announced, it's understood that senior figures in race control are quietly evaluating whether Leclerc's maneuver created an undue advantage or violated sporting fairness clauses under Article 27.4, which governs unsportsmanlike behavior in qualifying traffic management. Should any formal protest be lodged, the results of qualifying could be provisionally amended, casting further uncertainty over the front rows of the starting grid. Internally, both camps are scrambling to manage the emotional fallout. Mercedes engineers are reportedly rerunning simulations under disrupted air conditions to better understand what exactly Hamilton lost in the final sector, while Ferrari has deployed its internal PR machinery to frame Leclerc's actions as spontaneous brilliance rather than disobedience. However, off-the-record murmurs suggest that even within Ferrari, some voices are raising concerns over Leclerc's repeated pattern of overriding team orders in high-pressure scenarios, a trait that, while sometimes spectacular, often places the Scuderia in damage control mode. As for the drivers, their working relationship, never especially warm, has now descended into open hostility. Multiple insiders have confirmed that the FIA is planning to hold a private mediation session between Hamilton and Leclerc before Sunday's race to prevent further escalation. Whether this will suffice to restore even minimal professional decorum remains doubtful. Several members of the grid have reportedly expressed concern that the incident could carry over into Turn 1 of the race itself, especially if the two drivers start in adjacent grid positions. Given Silverstone's high-speed entry and minimal runoff areas, any tension left unresolved could manifest in catastrophic on-track consequences. What began as a simple deviation from a planned sequence has now mutated into an emotionally combustible saga, with repercussions stretching across competitive dynamics, team hierarchies, media narratives, and fan perceptions. No one could have predicted that a single unauthorized flying lap would tear open such raw emotional wounds, laying bare the fragile equilibrium that exists between ego, ambition, and trust in modern Formula One. As the sport now braces for what promises to be a race charged with tension, retaliation, and potentially high drama, one truth remains certain: whatever happens next between Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc, the echoes of Silverstone will reverberate through the rest of the season, possibly even beyond. Whether driven by instinct, competitive desperation, or a sheer refusal to submit to authority, Charles Leclerc made a split-second decision that would trigger one of the most controversial qualifying finales in recent memory. The command from the Ferrari pit wall had been clear, repeated twice with growing urgency: hold position, do not begin another push lap. But with the session clock winding down and the pressure of Q3 mounting like a tidal wave, Leclerc defied protocol with breathtaking boldness. As he exited Copse Corner, he didn't back off, he did the opposite. With a sudden burst of acceleration, he charged into Maggots and Beckett's with uncompromising aggression, slicing through the complex at full commitment, tires screaming for grip, his SF24 on the edge of adhesion. It was a last-ditch attempt, executed with seconds to spare, and without any clearance or confirmation from the race engineers. The repercussions of that lone decision radiated across the final moments of Q3 like an unexpected detonation. Behind Leclerc, a delicate queue had formed, cars spread out in surgical precision, drivers preparing to embark on their final laps, with optimal spacing carefully managed to maximize clear air. Among them was Lewis Hamilton, lying in wait like a predator, placed perfectly to attack on a fresh set of softs. Mercedes had timed their release to perfection, placing Hamilton in the ideal pocket to start his flyer at the last possible second. But Leclerc's unauthorized launch into his final lap caused an unforeseen ripple effect, accelerating the pack and collapsing the pre-planned time gaps like falling dominoes. Traffic swelled and compressed with alarming speed in the final sector, and chaos ensued. Caught in the crossfire was Hamilton, whose position in the sequence went from strategic to sabotaged in mere seconds. As the pack bunched up heading into club corner, Lewis found himself boxed in behind slower cars still winding up for their own flying laps. The frantic accordion effect stripped him of any chance to accelerate cleanly out of the final turn. By the time he reached the start-finish line, the clock had already ticked past zero. He missed his window by a heartbreaking 1.8 seconds. There would be no final lap, no opportunity to respond, no shot at pole. His session was effectively over, killed not by his own mistake or mechanical fault, but by a move from a rival team's driver that many saw as reckless at best and intentionally disruptive at worst. The emotional fallout was immediate and explosive. Even before returning to the garage, Hamilton's radio silence spoke volumes. No debrief, no pleasantries. The moment he pulled into his pit box, every gesture conveyed fury. He didn't even remove his helmet before storming toward the rear of the Mercedes garage. His gloved hands ripped the earpieces from his head and flung them onto the floor in a cloud of frustration. What caught everyone's attention, however, was the way his eyes locked onto the Ferrari pit wall's data screen. Leclerc's lap time was glowing on the display, a symbol of defiance and, at least in Hamilton's eyes, disrespect. Witnesses in the garage described him standing frozen for several seconds, helmet still on, just staring, as if processing the magnitude of what had just transpired. Then came what many in the paddock are now calling the garage confrontation. Hamilton, still visibly enraged, reportedly demanded an immediate explanation from his race engineer, Peter Bonington. The back and forth was curt and sharp, with Hamilton repeatedly asking why no warning had been issued about Leclerc's sudden launch. Bonington, in a rare moment of visible discomfort, admitted they had no idea Leclerc was going for another push, because Ferrari hadn't communicated it even over open radio. That revelation turned Hamilton's frustration into something deeper, a feeling of being blindsided not only by a rival but by a breakdown in inter-team awareness that cost him dearly. In the hours that followed, the paddock descended into a frenzy of speculation, accusation, and internal investigation. Mercedes engineers pored over telemetry, trying to pinpoint the exact second the timeline collapsed. Meanwhile, inside the Ferrari camp, there was reportedly tension as well. While Leclerc's lap had briefly promoted him to P3, his actions had thrown the entire session into disarray and drew criticism from rival teams. Some saw his defiance as a dangerous breach of track etiquette, others interpreted it as a sign of internal conflict within Ferrari's own command structure. Insiders whispered that Leclerc's relationship with his race engineer had deteriorated in recent weeks, especially after strategy miscommunications in prior races. Whether this was an intentional snub or a high-risk gamble born out of frustration remained an open question. Hamilton, meanwhile, remained guarded in his post-session interview. Speaking with terse sentences and measured words, he refused to directly name Leclerc but made his feelings unmistakably clear. Some drivers don't understand the consequences of their actions in qualifying. We all rely on order, on timing, on respecting the queue. When someone decides to go rogue, everyone pays the price. The normally composed seven-time champion's tone was steely, his smile non-existent. When asked if he would raise the matter with the FIA, he simply replied, "Let's see if they care." The incident sparked wider debate within the paddock about qualifying protocols and the responsibility of drivers to respect not just team orders but the delicate choreography of the closing minutes of Q3. Several team principals weighed in, including Toto Wolff, who described Leclerc's maneuver as disruptive and unprofessional, while Fred Vasseur defended his driver, claiming Leclerc felt he had a clear track and took his chance. But beneath the surface, tensions were simmering. This wasn't just a case of a missed lap, it was a flashpoint between two fierce competitors whose histories are already intertwined, both gunning for glory in a season where every point, every tenth, every qualifying position could be the difference between triumph and failure. In private, Mercedes team members admitted the mood was dark. The lost opportunity wasn't just a blip on the stat sheet, it could shape the outcome of the weekend. Hamilton had looked strong throughout free practice, and the team had genuine belief that pole was within reach. Instead, they were left to grapple with a sense of betrayal, a belief that trust between competitors had been broken, and that Leclerc's defiance had cost them dearly. As for Leclerc, he seemed unfazed in the moments after qualifying, giving a casual wave to the crowd and brushing off questions about the incident with a tight-lipped grin. But the fallout had only just begun. Inside the paddock, everyone understood one thing: when the lights go out on Sunday, this rivalry will carry fresh wounds, and those wounds won't heal quickly. Without uttering a single word to his engineers or acknowledging the chaos erupting behind him in the Mercedes garage, Lewis Hamilton stormed out with unrelenting urgency, his helmet still fastened, visor lowered, and eyes locked on a singular target, the heart of the Ferrari compound. He walked with such intensity that even the onlookers, seasoned mechanics and media personnel alike, instinctively stepped aside. Team radio transmissions recorded by Mercedes later revealed an increasingly frantic Toto Wolff and a visibly concerned Peter Bonington pleading with him to stop, to wait, to reconsider, but Hamilton paid them no heed. He wasn't responding, not physically, not emotionally, and certainly not over the comms. It was as though the seven-time world champion had been pushed beyond a threshold that few had ever seen him approach in public. Eyewitnesses, including paddock officials and several team members from neighboring garages, described the scene with a mixture of awe and apprehension. According to one Aston Martin engineer, Hamilton's demeanor was like a fuse had finally burned down to the end. You could feel the electricity in the air shift when he walked past. Without waiting for clearance or explanation, Hamilton marched directly into the Ferrari hospitality suite, pushing past a stunned security guard whose attempt to block his entrance was brushed off as though the man wasn't even there. Inside, the mood had just been settling after a chaotic qualifying session when Hamilton's unexpected arrival caused a collective gasp. Charles Leclerc had been engaged in a technical debrief with Frédéric Vasseur and a senior Ferrari race strategist when Hamilton burst into the room. What transpired next left even the most veteran paddock insiders shaken. With no preamble, Hamilton raised his voice, his words coming fast, sharp, and filled with incredulous rage. "You cost me everything," he shouted, loud enough for half the hospitality area to hear. "That lap was mine. You knew the track order. We agreed on it. You don't just break ranks like that. We're not playing games out there." His tone wasn't the usual cool, composed articulation fans have come to expect. This was raw, unfiltered fury. Leclerc, momentarily caught off guard, tried to de-escalate but was visibly tense. "Lewis, I don't drive for you," he snapped back. "I had the pace. I saw an opening, I took it. That's racing. I'm not here to play your teammate." What followed was a furious back and forth, not just between two of the sport's most talented drivers, but two men who felt utterly betrayed, each in his own way. Hamilton accused Leclerc of violating an unspoken code among drivers, of consciously undercutting a lap time that had been strategically planned. Leclerc denied any premeditated wrongdoing, claiming he had simply reacted instinctively, as any racer would in the heat of the moment, especially with pole position within reach. Observers close to the confrontation say the argument escalated rapidly. Hamilton reportedly stepped forward, closing the distance between them with visible agitation, forcing a Ferrari staff member to insert himself between the two. The tension was thick, almost combustible. Leclerc raised his voice, arms flailing in disbelief, trying to explain his version of the events, but Hamilton wasn't having it. "You knew what you were doing. You knew I was behind you. You took that corner like it was a race, not qualifying," he bellowed. Leclerc fired back. "So what should I have done? Slammed the brakes? I saw green sectors. I went for it." In the background, Vasseur appeared stunned but then swiftly turned his ire to one of Ferrari's senior engineers. Witnesses overheard him questioning whether Leclerc had ignored direct instructions from the pit wall during Q3. "We told him to hold position," Vasseur reportedly yelled, slamming his headset onto a nearby table. The scene descended into chaos as Ferrari personnel tried to contain the situation from spiraling further. Meanwhile, Hamilton, still clearly seething, brushed past another team member who attempted to calm him down, causing a minor scuffle that thankfully stopped short of a physical altercation. It was only after FIA security personnel stepped in, alerted by both Mercedes and Ferrari officials, that the two drivers were physically separated. Hamilton, still breathing heavily, was escorted back toward the paddock under a cloud of confusion, anger, and disbelief. Leclerc remained inside the Ferrari suite, fuming and visibly shaken, surrounded by a mix of engineers, strategists, and PR staff unsure of how to manage the fallout. The implications of the confrontation began to ripple almost immediately. While neither team released an official statement within the hour, murmurs spread rapidly throughout the paddock. Some journalists began drawing comparisons to infamous intra-team battles of the past, citing this incident as one of the most emotionally charged driver clashes witnessed off-track in recent years. Within minutes, footage of Hamilton's stormy departure from the Mercedes garage and his uninvited entry into the Ferrari suite began surfacing on social media, fueling a frenzy of speculation and polarized fan reactions. Some defended Hamilton's fury as justified given the high stakes of the championship fight, while others criticized him for confronting a rival team's driver so publicly. What made the situation even more complex was the strategic context behind the clash. According to insiders, both Mercedes and Ferrari had prearranged a Q3 running order that would allow Hamilton a tow on his final hot lap, with Leclerc expected to hold back until after Hamilton had set his time. That plan, it seems, collapsed the moment Leclerc detected a minor lift in the delta times and opted to overtake in Sector 2, disrupting Hamilton's rhythm and leading to a botched final flying lap that cost him a potential front-row start. Leclerc's explanation, that he acted on instinct and wasn't aware of Hamilton's exact positioning, was not enough to satisfy Hamilton or the Mercedes camp. Tensions between the two teams have now reached a boiling point, with both sides reportedly considering formal complaints to the FIA, not necessarily for breach of rules, but for conduct detrimental to the sporting spirit. Meanwhile, Hamilton returned to the Mercedes motorhome visibly composed yet brooding, avoiding media questions and declining to participate in the post-qualifying press conference. Leclerc, on the other hand, gave a brief, curt interview stating, "I raced. I saw the gap. I took it. That's what we do. If he has a problem with that, we'll talk. But I won't apologize for racing." As the sun began to set over the paddock, the air remained heavy with tension. Conversations in every corner of the media zone, engineering areas, and team lounges circled back to the altercation. For some, it marked the eruption of long-simmering tensions between two of Formula One's fiercest competitors. For others, it was a reminder that even in a sport governed by milliseconds, emotions, egos, and rivalries still burn with a fury that no regulation can contain. The situation has escalated dramatically within the Formula One paddock following the highly controversial events at the conclusion of Q3. What initially appeared to be a questionable tactical maneuver by Charles Leclerc has now spiraled into a full-blown crisis with wide-reaching implications. Mercedes-AMG Petronas Formula One team has formally submitted a request to the FIA to launch a comprehensive inquiry into the final moments of the qualifying session, asserting that there was what they term unjustified interference that compromised the fundamental integrity and timing accuracy of the session. According to sources close to the Mercedes camp, the team believes that the sequence of events, timing anomalies, strategic disruption, and the suspicious positioning of Leclerc's Ferrari, cannot be dismissed as coincidental or accidental. They argue that the situation raises not just sporting concerns but questions of procedural manipulation that may warrant formal sanctions or rule amendments in the future. Within the Scuderia Ferrari camp, the mood is equally tense, albeit for entirely different reasons. While the team has not made any public statements condemning Leclerc's actions, several high-ranking figures within the Maranello-based outfit have privately acknowledged that the Monégasque driver acted outside of pre-agreed team protocols. Internal communications reportedly show that Leclerc ignored specific instructions from the pit wall, choosing instead to follow what he later described as his gut instinct in a high-stakes moment. One Ferrari engineer, who spoke on the condition of anonymity, revealed that the strategy leading into Q3 was precisely calibrated to avoid any interaction with rivals in the final flying laps, especially with both Red Bull and Mercedes having shown rapid pace throughout the weekend. Leclerc's deviation from that plan has sparked heated debates internally, with several strategists concerned that his decision reflects a growing pattern of rogue behavior that could fracture team cohesion if left unaddressed. Lewis Hamilton, who rarely comments with such candor immediately after a session, delivered a post-qualifying interview that quickly made headlines across motorsport media outlets. The seven-time world champion, visibly agitated and speaking with a level of emotional intensity not often seen from him in recent years, stated, "There are unwritten rules in this sport. You don't screw over the entire grid to get your way. I've been racing long enough to know when something's intentional. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice." Hamilton's statement has since been replayed and dissected by analysts and pundits across the globe, with many interpreting it as a direct accusation that Leclerc deliberately disrupted the competitive flow of the session for personal or strategic advantage. Sources within Mercedes later clarified that Hamilton had access to telemetry data showing unusual deceleration patterns and track position data that reinforced his suspicions of deliberate interference. In contrast, Charles Leclerc remained composed when addressing the media, but his words carried a weight that only added to the firestorm. "I was in the car. I saw what was happening. I did what I thought was right. I live with that," he said, offering neither an apology nor an acknowledgement of any wrongdoing. While some praised his stoicism and confidence, others viewed his refusal to express regret as symptomatic of a deeper disregard for the communal nature of motorsport competition. The lack of contrition has further intensified backlash, particularly among drivers who felt their Q3 laps were compromised as a direct result of Leclerc's positioning and pace management in the closing seconds of the session. Online platforms have since become battlegrounds for impassioned debate. Twitter, Reddit, and Instagram have seen a massive influx of commentary from fans, journalists, and even former F1 personnel. Divisions have formed within the fanbase, with one faction hailing Leclerc's move as emblematic of a true racer's mentality, someone who capitalizes on every opportunity regardless of the consequences, while others have condemned it as a flagrant act of selfishness that endangered the fairness of the competition. Hashtags such as #Leclerc controversy, #Q3 chaos, and #FIA review are trending globally, reflecting the scale of the uproar. Former F1 world champions and seasoned voices in the paddock have not remained silent either. Nico Rosberg, who is no stranger to intra-team drama and high-pressure qualifying scenarios, expressed deep concern during a live broadcast. "This isn't just about one moment," he said. "This is a breakdown in the trust that holds this sport together. When drivers start making unilateral decisions that affect the outcome for everyone else, it undermines everything the sport is built on." His remarks were echoed by Jenson Button, another former champion known for his measured and insightful commentary, who added, "Leclerc may have just burned a few bridges today. You can't operate in this sport as an island. At some point, you need the support of your peers. That move won't be forgotten anytime soon." The FIA, for its part, has remained tight-lipped about the details of the investigation, but has confirmed that a formal review is underway. A spokesperson stated that race stewards and technical delegates are currently analyzing telemetry, radio communications, and positional data to determine whether any rules were violated or if the actions in question fell into a gray area not yet covered by existing regulations. This ambiguity is now prompting renewed calls from several team principals to revise the rulebook to explicitly outline what constitutes unsporting behavior in qualifying, particularly with respect to deliberate disruptions. Behind the scenes, the political ramifications are beginning to unfold as well. Sources suggest that the team principals of Mercedes, Red Bull, and even Aston Martin have been in private discussions, considering a joint letter to the FIA demanding not only clarification on the Leclerc incident but also broader structural reforms to prevent similar controversies in the future. The consensus among many in the paddock is that Formula One cannot afford repeated moments of this nature without damaging its credibility and the perception of fairness that underpins fan loyalty and commercial value. Moreover, tensions within Ferrari appear to be growing. While team principal Frédéric Vasseur has so far defended Leclerc's general performance this season, insiders report that this latest act of disobedience could complicate future contract negotiations. There are whispers that Carlos Sainz, currently in limbo regarding his future seat, may leverage this moment to strengthen his case as a more reliable and team-oriented driver. Meanwhile, Leclerc's camp insists that the incident is being blown out of proportion, and that his instincts have won him races in the past and could do so again if properly harnessed. In summary, what began as a single driver's decision in the heat of qualifying has evolved into a multi-layered controversy touching on driver autonomy, team discipline, regulatory clarity, and the ethics of competition in elite motorsport. With investigations ongoing, reputations on the line, and the season reaching a pivotal phase, the entire F1 community is now bracing for the fallout, not just from what happened on track, but from what it reveals about the fragile alliances and explosive tensions simmering beneath the surface of the sport. Even within the Ferrari organization, the internal fracture is now more apparent than ever, quietly brewing beneath the surface yet unmistakably palpable to those who know where to look. Among the engineers, mechanics, and strategists who form the lifeblood of the Scuderia, there's an increasingly stark contrast in perspectives. A growing contingent, particularly among those closest to Charles Leclerc's side of the garage, appears to empathize with the Monégasque driver's bold defiance. Their support is not without justification. Race after race, season after season, Leclerc has watched meticulously crafted strategies unravel in real time. often due to split-second miscalculations or baffling indecision from the pit wall. In their view, his move wasn't rebellion. It was long overdue autonomy in a sport that punishes hesitation and demands instinct. For them, Leclerc simply did what any elite competitor would have done when cornered. He acted decisively, even if it meant risking internal discord. But that's only one side of the equation. There remains a significant and vocal faction within the team that sees things differently. Engineers and decision-makers who believe Leclerc crossed an invisible but critical line. To them, what unfolded was less a moment of self-assertion and more a flagrant display of individualism that undercut the very essence of teamwork upon which Ferrari prides itself. They argue that the ethos of Formula One at its highest level depends on structure, discipline, and mutual trust. If every driver were to go rogue in pursuit of personal glory, the carefully calibrated machinery of a race team would quickly descend into chaos. This group is concerned that Leclerc's act of independence sets a dangerous precedent, particularly at a time when Ferrari's delicate internal chemistry is still recovering from years of inconsistency and internal power shifts. The rift is not just about one decision. It's about trust, culture, and the soul of a team that has seen too many false dawns. In the broader paddock, the situation has sparked endless speculation and heated conversations behind closed doors. Team principals, former champions, and technical analysts alike are scrutinizing not just the incident, but its deeper implications for Ferrari and for the championship narrative as a whole. This moment of drama has cracked open questions that have lingered for months. Is Leclerc truly the future of Ferrari, or is his ambition beginning to outgrow the red car? Can a team plagued by strategy blunders and mixed messaging really harness the full potential of two highly talented drivers without imploding under the pressure? And most crucially, how will this latest turbulence affect the morale, cohesion, and operational focus of a team that is already walking a tightrope? As for Lewis Hamilton, the reverberations are just as intense, albeit of a different flavor. Denied a front row start due to a confusing sequence of team radio miscommunications and strategic hesitations that cost him precious tenths, the seven-time world champion finds himself brimming with a mix of frustration and fiery determination. This is a man who has built an entire legacy around calculated comebacks, defying adversity, and channeling emotional weight into clinical brilliance on track. Though his body language in the paddock remains stoic, insiders suggest his inner circle is livid with how events unfolded, particularly with what they perceive as avoidable errors from his own camp. For Hamilton, tomorrow's race represents not just an opportunity to regain lost ground, but a chance to send a message that, even amid chaos, greatness doesn't fold, it rises. Leclerc, meanwhile, will be facing an entirely different kind of storm. Beyond the tension from rival teams, he will also have to navigate the frigid, perhaps even hostile atmosphere within his own garage. There are whispers of closed-door meetings, of senior team members expressing private disappointment, and of a sudden cooling in the once warm dynamic between driver and strategist. The trust that binds a driver to the voice in his ear, the strategist who calls the shots in battle, may now be frayed, and that could spell disaster in a sport where milliseconds matter and blind faith in the team is often the difference between podiums and purgatory. And then there's the psychological layer. Formula One is as much a mental contest as it is a physical one. The battlefield of Silverstone is no longer confined to the tarmac. It has extended into the minds of the competitors. The race itself is expected to be volatile, emotional, and potentially incendiary. Every overtake, every defensive move, every strategic pit call will be laced with the subtext of this unfolding drama. It is no longer just about points. It's about pride, redemption, and survival. The emotional temperature across the paddock is at a boiling point. Journalists are scrambling to read between the lines of guarded interviews. PR teams are in overdrive attempting to project unity, and fans are split in fierce debates across forums and social media. For Ferrari, a team that wears its legacy like a crown of both glory and burden, this weekend threatens to unravel into something far more damaging than a poor race result. The very fabric of team unity could be at risk, and repairing it will require more than hollow apologies or post-race statements. It may require a complete recalibration of internal dynamics, or even personnel changes, if trust cannot be swiftly and sincerely rebuilt. There's also a long-term dimension few are talking about out loud, but many are thinking quietly. Could this be the beginning of the end for Leclerc's relationship with Ferrari? Could Hamilton's continued struggles nudge him further toward considering alternative futures beyond Mercedes? With the driver market always volatile, moments like these have a way of triggering seismic shifts. A single flashpoint, like a controversial team order, a breach of trust, or a cold stare in the paddock, can be the start of months-long fallout that eventually reshapes the grid itself. What is certain is that the British Grand Prix, once viewed as a celebration of motorsport tradition and national pride, has now become a deeply personal and psychological saga, one that has exposed the vulnerabilities, ambitions, and breaking points of the sport's most iconic figures. It has reminded everyone watching that beneath the glamorous veneer of sponsorships, state-of-the-art machinery, and rehearsed post-race soundbites lies a fiercely human drama. The kind of drama that cannot be engineered, predicted, or easily contained. The facade has cracked. The tension is no longer theoretical, it is alive, charged, and reverberating through every corridor of the paddock. What was supposed to be just another race weekend is now etched into the emotional history of Formula One, and its ripple effects may linger far longer than anyone anticipates.